Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Holladay, and I am a Tau Beta Sigma Life member from the Eta Omega chapter at California State University, Fresno, as well as one of the Tau Beta Sigma Western District counselors. And I'm here presenting with.
Hey there, my name's Emily Blaze, and I'm a life member from the Eta Alpha chapter at Syracuse University.
So today we are going to be discussing the history and evolution of Tau Beta Sigma songs. And so we'll have a slide deck that goes along with this up until a point where we'll have Emily share some really great insight and background into her contribution to the sorority. Goals for our session today are to talk about Tau Beta Sigma songs. We'll start off with the early years and how things were kind of difficult in terms of trying to figure out what exactly was going on with song history and song creation for the sorority. And then we will transition into discussing about our loyalty song, as well as our national hymn. And then we'll discuss a period of intense growth and historic updates to our songs, leading into the current, most recent song, the Affirmation, as well as just some takeaways that Emily and myself have regarding this whole experience. So start off with the early years. So preparation for this presentation actually started with me trying to figure out, where did our songs come from? How did they come to be? Who made them? And so the first step is to always look into primary sources, right? So I went and researched as best as I could the National Archives for past minutes and interviews with obviously those primary sources, those who lived it, podium articles, etc. Just trying to find anything I possibly could. It was really challenging to find material, and I'm still interested in doing more digging. There's quite a bit of information that I know is still out there that we still need to find, but we were able to gather enough information to create a presentation. Previous minutes don't really indicate a ton of information, so we're having to kind of piece together some things, but as we move forward through history and through time, minutes taking got a little bit better, and a lot more information was listed there. So again, the preparation for this was really challenging, trying to find information, but we were able to get something to share with you today. So in looking at the digitized minutes, nothing really jumped out in terms of some sort of a official song for the sorority. There were some minutes that did allude to there not being an official song, but that many chapters would sing chapter songs, which still happens today. There's plenty of chapters in our in the United States that have made chapter songs for themselves, but there's nothing official for the sorority. For example, the Alpha Omega chapter candidate class at the 1956 convention, or I'm sorry, of 1956, sang a song, their chapter song, at the 1957 convention. And so that was just an example of going through the minutes and seeing like, oh, there were chapter songs and they happened to be sung at convention for the entire delegation. And so specifically in that 1957 convention, I saw the very first indication that there might have been some sort of quote unquote official song. And specifically, it was in a portion of the minutes that actually related to editing the candidate or new member manual. So in editing that manual, the Tau Beta Sigma loyalty song, which is what they called it, was updated to add that it be sung, and then this is in quotes, to be sung to the tune of Tell Me Why. So I go on the internet, I'm like, tell me why, who is this? And what is by the Four Aces? It was a very popular song back in that time. And I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna play a little audio recording of this song so you can kind of hear what at least the tune sounded like. I'm not sure of the words, but we'll go ahead and play for you a 10-15 second snippet of this song so you can kind of hear a little bit about what it sounded like.
Tell me why, though I try to forget, tell me why I think of you yet. I know I'll never be
no clue what the words might have been, but that you can tell, you can kind of, I started swaying a little bit. Just it sounds like something that maybe they made up words about sisterhood or service or something or music. But we'll never, I mean, maybe we'll never know, but again, I kind of want to do some more digging on that. And then moving forward, obviously 1957 minutes, not much there. And in 1961, you start seeing some indication of some forward movement in selecting songs for Taba de Sigma. There's a committee called the Appeals Committee that in their minutes discussed a possibility of selecting new songs for Taba de Sigma. A. Frank Martin, someone who's near and dear to the sorority's heart, was definitely suggesting this, and that committee, along with his guidance, discussed multiple ways of going about creating or selecting new songs. Maybe it could be candidate class projects, or maybe each chapter submit an original song to the delegation, or maybe they compile all these songs and create sort of a song booklet that's going to be distributed or sold. So there's a variety of different ways to go about getting new songs for the sorority that they listed in minutes here. And again, it was listed again in these minutes that the only song that they really knew of was the, Tell Me Why, right? But they didn't quite know what other songs TBS was singing nationally. And so the committee made suggestions for the selection and use of Taba de Sigma songs. And one of the suggestions was that the singing of the sorority song should become part of the order of business for each chapter. Constitution should be revised to include this. So at some point in the 60s, early 60s, the sorority, at least the national level, was, and these are delegates from various chapters going to national convention, were really thinking that song should be an integral part of the sorority's behavior, of their business, but yet there was no singular song that they could all get behind. So you could tell that there was some forward movement here in terms of trying to select some sort of a song for everybody to get behind, and they wanted to make it a really important aspect of the sorority business and sorority life. So moving on to the actual loyalty song, right? So when did this get started? And so in the 1963 convention, moving forward, there was at that convention, a committee was formed to hold a contest to select a new loyalty song. And that was pretty much what the minutes said. Ladine Bennett, who was the chairman, former national secretary, she'd appoint a committee to begin a contest for a cash award to select a new loyalty song. So all songs could be submitted from any chapter, one being the winner. They would choose one of those. They set parameters specifically around this, where the song must have at least 2 verses, must have original text and music. They set a date that the song should be submitted by, August 1st, 1964, to be presented at the 65 National Convention. And specifically, they said only honoraries or sponsors or Kappa Kappa Psi, Taba de Sigma individuals could actually be eligible composers. So you just couldn't get some random individual or some other composer that's not part of the organizations or is some sort of an honorary or sponsor to actually do this. So they really wanted it to come from the sorority or fraternity membership. And then in 1965, so again, back in 1963, they said 1964 is our deadline, 1965 we'll review these. It seemed like at some point between those years, this committee was created, but at the 1965 convention, the History and Traditions Committee felt that instead of a select committee actually choosing this song, they wanted the members of the sorority to choose it, so the delegation, which I agree with. I think that makes sense. And so they laid out in their report that, so I guess some of the songs that were submitted weren't necessarily found desirable, so they extended the deadline to the 1967 convention. And at that convention, that's where Patricia Ann Wooldridge, who is a life member from the Beta Delta chapter at Texas Christian University, she submitted her song for consideration. After a performance of this song at the convention, the delegation discussed its merits and commented, quote unquote, the originality of the music and words were quite impressive. So it seemed like the delegation really enjoyed her submission, which was originally written and composed by her, and they officially voted and adopted that song as our loyalty song. This is in 1967. and that is the history of the loyalty song as we know it. There's not a lot more information, and that's the one that I want to get more information about. So hopefully, or maybe over the next year, we'll be able to get some more information about that. But moving forward too with the prelude to the national hymn. So the national hymn didn't come right away. So at the end of the 1960s, the loyalty song was approved and people liked it for the most part. But entering into the 1970s and 1980s, it was a time of growth and change for the sorority, both in the areas of professionalism and definitely diversity. In the mid-1970s, the Tau Beta Sigma Ritual and Regalia Committee charged the national leadership with lowering the pitch at the 1975 convention. They mentioned it's too high. Our membership isn't able to sing it well, and that didn't go through. So the original pitch is maintained the same. And also, it was actually quoted in the minutes from that convention that, quote unquote, the loyalty song was too peppy and could not be used in a dignified ritualistic atmosphere, which is something very interesting to say, but you can clearly see that the delegation of the sorority at that time, it just seemed to signal that the membership wasn't entirely happy with the current song. And so with that, it led to an initiative to actually replace the loyalty song entirely, not even a decade after they had brought it through. So it's very interesting how just within a decade, so much was changing as to the makeup of the sorority that would prompt them to want to just shelve this song altogether in favor of a new song. And so moving forward, here's some background. Prior to the 1977 convention, prior to that, you were seeing, obviously, and I think I'd mentioned this before too, chapters creating their own songs, right? And so this was still occurring even though Tau Beta Sigma had its own loyalty song that everybody could sing and things like that. Chapters were obviously, stepping out and creating their own. And this was to be true of Kathy Rutherford from the Beta Eta chapter at University of Maryland. She, along with the music committee, arranged a song for their chapter. And this song, it took a melody that was used in an orchestration class by Dr. Corwin Taylor, who was a professor emeritus at the university. And so we're not quite sure where this melody came from, if it was made from a textbook or maybe if it was something that he came up with on his own. But at any rate, he allowed the chapter to use this melody for their song. And so the music committee wrote the lyrics, and some sisters helped with arranging the harmonies around a core melody, which was again from Dr. Taylor. And then the hymn was finalized in this 1975-76 school year as the official Beta Eta chapter song. And so prior to 1977's convention, that's where the sorority was again reeling off of the 1975 convention, where they said the loyalty song was no longer something that was dignified. They were requesting additional songs to be submitted at the 1977 convention. And at the convention, 2 were submitted to be voted on alongside the current loyalty song. One of them was called Teach Me Sisters. It was a song words by Nadine Dorschler, who's a former National First Vice President, and Alice Jacobs, arrangement adapted by Nadine Dorschler. And alongside that song was also the Beta Eta chapter song. So they decided that they liked their song so much, the University of Maryland, they submitted theirs for approval here. And that was again, Beta Eta chapter, music committee, Kathy Rutherford, along with music by Dr. Corwin Taylor, who had the core melody. So at this convention, there was a secret ballot vote. And the secret ballot vote led to a runoff election between the Beta Eta hymn and the loyalty song. Teach Me Sisters didn't end up making it through that first round. And then after that, it seemed as if the delegation wasn't quite interested in a complete replacement. There was an intense debate. The minutes attributed this, something was going on. People were not quite happy. They weren't necessarily wanting to replace the loyalty song until a member of the Beta Eta chapter actually requested that the current loyalty song remain the same, and that the delegation adopt the Beta Eta entry to become, quote unquote, the Tau Beta Sigma hymn. And this motion passed. And then now, as we know it, the Tau Beta Sigma national hymn was adopted It's clearly more reverent piece of music, and it was adopted alongside the more peppy version, the loyalty song. So instead of replacing the loyalty song entirely, we left the 1977 convention with 2 songs that chapters can sing as they wish. And some additional historic updates to our songs and other things that I think is really important to note as we move forward and talk more about the continued evolution of our sorority. So obviously during the 1970s was the passage of Title IX, and this was a federal civil rights law passed as part of the U.S. Education Amendments Act of 1972. Because of this passage of this act, Tau Beta Sigma began the process of becoming gender inclusive. And this what meant that the sorority, which was only accepting women, had to, go through and revise their entrance policies, and they were accepting men now, and basically went through and removed pretty much any gendered language from any sorority content. So again, really evolving with the times and being very inclusive with the diversity that was coming into the sorority. And then specifically at the 1983 convention, the History and Traditions Committee, they were charged with removing that gendered language and making the songs more inclusive. So not only gendered language from rituals, but actual removing and replacing words from our various songs. And so in the next slide, you can actually see some of the changes. So the first one is this is the version of the loyalty song and the national hymn. These are just some examples of what changed. So in the loyalty song, the words used to be, "We're girls who are sisters." And then instead they changed it to "We who are loyal." And then another line would be, "Girls who stand out above the rest," was changed to "We who stand out above the rest." And same thing happening for national hymn. They, just different things, they're removing certain words, replacing it with more gender neutral language. And then another aspect that was changed was also just, again, evolving to be more professional, was leaving the version of handwritten and actually going into typewritten. And so in the next slide, you'll see that the Ritual Regalia Committee in that same convention charged that all the sorority songs be typewritten. And the next slide shows you what they used to look like. So this is what you would see if you were looking at our songs prior to 1983. Things were handwritten out, which to my jazz loving heart, this looks great. But obviously, looking forward to being more professional, they wanted everything typewritten. So again, this is just an example of the sororities going through immense changes in both diversity and inclusion, and it included really evolving our songs, both in the language that was presented through the songs, as well as the way that they were presented on paper. So it was not until over 2 decades later that the sorority would be again in a position to seek change regarding songs. The 80s, the 90s, definitely lots of changes throughout the sorority, continuing to admit more men, continuing to expand and grow across our nation. So we're getting various chapters at different universities, just like really becoming more of ourselves, like who Tau Beta Sigma is and what we stand for. And I think, the 80s and 90s were definitely a time where the sorority was figuring that out. Who are we and what do we stand for? So a lot transpired for the sorority over those 2 decades. And this change was also manifesting itself at the chapter level, where many members were again continuing to write songs that fit their chapter's own unique membership needs. Obviously, we're a music sorority, and so it would just make sense that music would be obviously something that we all center around in honor of Tau Beta Sigma, but also that you would see chapters centering around in honor of themselves. And so, as we're growing and expanding over those 2 decades, as fate would have it, someone at a particular chapter who I'm going to introduce soon, her name is Emily, and she was at the Eta Alpha chapter at Syracuse University, and she really felt the same way, frustrated with the way the chapter felt about singing the 2 official songs, how that really worked out for her chapter or didn't. She said about creating a new song, and one that was going to be simple enough, but also reverent enough to honor the sorority and the ideals that we hold dear. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and bring on Emily so she can talk firsthand about the history of the song that she created and all of the contributions that she's given to the sorority with her song, The Affirmation.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Alexis. That was really great. Really appreciate all of that history and knowledge. And it's actually very interesting hearing it all now after having written the affirmation and having it become the new national song. Because who knows if this song would have turned out the same way, having known all that history. And so, um, brief introduction about me. I'm a registered architect in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I work at Google, and I'm based out of our Pittsburgh campus, where I'm the head of facilities. I graduated Syracuse University in 2005, and I was a member of the Eta Alpha chapter of TBS. I am not a composer. I am not a music major, and I'm not even a great musician. I played piccolo in the SUMB, Syracuse University Marching Band, probably should be specific about that, and was a drum major in my last year there. I wrote field drill, but I did study voice, and I sung in a lot of ensembles at Syracuse University, including an a cappella group, women's choir, spent a lot of time around women, kind of both in TBS and in other organizations. I was always frustrated that we as a chapter couldn't sing our songs very well. And whether that's a fair representation or not, it kind of was the truth. We just weren't very good at it. And I would go straight from chapter to my a cappella group's practice session, and I would just feel so much more kind of musically satisfied every time I would go there. And I'm like, why is this so difficult? Why can't we sing our songs and feel good about them? Um, I'm sure several of current chapters within TBS have brother chapters in Kappa Kappa Psi, and through recruiting events, in advance of whenever your kind of membership candidacy is, you might have a joint event with your Kappa Kappa Psi partners. At Syracuse at the time, our chapters were strictly gendered. Just nature of the thing. They aren't anymore, and I'm super glad that the organizations have become more inclusive. But a lot of this story is kind of important to know that they were gendered at that time. And so when we would come together to do joint rush, it was all the boys and all the girls would get together and have some kind of a social event, and then we would end the night with singing our songs. The brothers always got to sing last. They always made us sing first because they knew that we didn't sound so great on our songs, and they wanted to kind of cap the evening with their rendition of their songs. Anyone who's old enough to have watched Nickelodeon may remember Camp Anawana, which was a show about kids in a summer camp. Looking back on it, is like a ridiculous concept, but it had a theme song that part of it went like, Camp Anawana, we hold you in our hearts, and when we think about you, it makes me want to fart. And I say that because there's a piece of one of our songs that sounds very similar to the Camp Anawana bit. And so instead of Camp Anawana, oh, Tau Beta Sigma. And so our brothers, being the delightful brothers that they were, would make fun of us before we would sing our song. And they would say, Tau Beta Sigma, we hold you in our hearts. And when we think about you, it makes me want to fart. So real classy from our brothers. And you can kind of sense how they felt about how we sang our songs. And then they would go out there and sing, and just like the room would stop and everything would melt, and you couldn't imagine all of these boys just turn into men and sing these songs together. And you could feel it. You could feel their energy. You could feel their passion. You could feel how they cared and felt about their organization. That just didn't translate when we sang our songs. It just didn't feel the same. And they're singing, I do not know how long 'twill be, or what the future holds for me. And it's just like emotional and and powerful. And you watch this and it pains you because you know you feel the same way about your organization and you're just not sharing it in the same way that they are. And everyone would leave Joint Rush with their song in their head. For this I know, if I must die. You know, you get this like, holy crap, they're talking about like, if I die, this means something. Like, our songs didn't have that. And I wanted to feel that way when I sang. I wanted to feel that kind of emotion and I wanted to share that. I wanted to better express how I felt about TBS when I sang our songs. So, okay, so let's do something about it, right? And initially going out to do this was not to be changing everything or to be a new national song, whatever. This was something I was doing for me. I was doing for our chapter so that we could convey that stronger sense of emotion and care. And then it hit me that our chapter wasn't bad at singing the song, is that the song was actually really hard to sing, especially for those who didn't study music. And, you know, one of the things Alexis noted earlier was the, you know, the higher key that several of our members struggled with. But I mean, you know, a lot of people in TBS, even though it is a music-centered organization, are going pro in something else. And a lot of them are not trained musicians or are not studying music. You know, perhaps they play an instrument, they enjoy being in band, they appreciate the sisterhood, and they appreciate music, but it might not be an area of study for them. And the other thing that I think Alexis kind of hit the nail on the head with the meeting minutes of it being peppy, the loyalty song, and how we would often like sing it slow and demure in order to try to imbue some kind of emotion to it, some kind of seriousness. And if I can sing a bit of the soprano two part. Now, of course, this is what I remember of the soprano two part, or it's what I learned of the soprano two part, and maybe it's not wholly true, but this is what I would sing. Music, our common tie, which binds us side by side. Melody, harmony, and fun, which doesn't sound like any fun at all. So even though it's like a peppy song, it actually sounds kind of good sung peppy, but as soon as you try to slow it down and make it solemn, it sounds like crap. And it also doesn't sound joyful, and it is very difficult to sing. There was a lot of kind of modulation in there that you don't sing all the time, might be a little bit difficult to do. So I looked at the Brothers song and I was like, what makes it so successful? Why does everybody leave Joint Rush with that in their head? What is it about it? And I realized their song has a lot of unison in it, whereas all of our songs had awful lot of harmony all the time. And there's something powerful about that simplicity, that you can really kind of get everybody on the same page with unison. It's also fairly repetitive. So a lot of things repeat, a lot of the words repeat. So that makes it a little simpler to sing, a little simpler to remember, and it kind of sticks with you a little bit more. It also sounds like something you can like sit around a campfire and sing, versus something that you have to like learn and be looking at the music and be focused about. It had more of a, there's something slightly more casual that made it resonate, I think, a little bit more. Okay, so let's sit at the piano. Let's start plunking some things out. Not a musician, not a piano player, not a composer. I'm going like this on the white keys, okay? So the first iteration I made was actually still too hard. I taught it to a couple of other folks who were singers in our chapter, and it was a struggle to teach them this new thing I had written. And it was like, okay, I still haven't gotten it simple enough. But luckily, you know, when you iterate, you're never starting from zero. You're always starting from something that you've done. So the next iteration came much faster. I had the strong pull towards something that was rhythmic, like walking at a steady, thoughtful pace. And that helped give some of that repetition. I also felt strongly that it should be more minor in order to give it that sense of solemnity, whereas major feels really peppy. Um, Interestingly, the original title of this song was The Solemn Affirmation. And I am not sure what happened to become the Affirmation song. Maybe part of the competition also changed the title to remove solemn, so maybe it didn't feel so dour, perhaps. But there was like a very intentional focus on solemnity. So I also wanted to weave some meaning into the simplicity to like give it some weight so that when you're singing it, it's not just a simple song, but it's something that every time you sing it, you also kind of carry with you other thoughts. And it's something you're singing for yourself and for the other sisters and brothers around you. And then the emotion kind of comes with it from there. So it starts in unison, it establishes a melody, it leverages a lot of harmony, and I'm not smart enough to use counterpoint. But the song at the end also doesn't really resolve. The work is never finished, and in that way the song is kind of never finished. It just kind of trails off as if it could just keep going off into the distance. But I think the biggest thing, the kind of what I would call the super secret, is the homage to Kappa Kappa Psi. And, this is the part where I really ask everyone to just kind of go with me for a second and hear me out on the whole thing. And then you can kind of make up your mind about it afterward. But TBS really does exist because of Kappa Kappa Psi, like it or not, whatever your feelings on the matter are, that is the truth. When I was in my membership candidacy, my chapter, Eta Alpha at Syracuse, brought Wava to Syracuse. And we had a weekend with her, and it was fantastic. We had a 3-hour Q&A session with her, which was amazing. And she told us her firsthand account of kind of the formation of the sisterhood, which I'm sure she's told many times. And my memory might be a little clouded on this, but this is what I remember, is that it was if you won't let us in, we'll make our own organization. And so that's kind of step one, how TBS exists because of Kappa Kappa Psi. But also, she talked about how those brothers really helped her and her friends really understand what it meant to be this type of an organization, kind of what it meant to be a band sorority, especially around rituals, around mission, around kind of a lot of the basics and foundational aspects of being an organization. And so kind of I really took that to heart, and as I was kind of plunking things out on the piano, some stuff just naturally lined up. And after I gave this presentation at the National Convention this year, I was really starting to think about how did this actually come about? And I think it was a lot of serendipity and, not so much chance, but things coming together and there being more of a sense of discovery than anything else. But when you get to the chorus and there's ta, beta, sigma, if you look at the music, ta, beta, sig, that is A, E, A. And that is the subtle, not so subtle, homage to our brothers and to our origin and our origin story. I am eternally surprised that this is an organization filled with music-y people and nobody saw that. And for some reason, every time I tell it, people are like, what? And they go back and look at it and it's like, how have you not plunked that out on the piano and come across AEA? But maybe it is because it very quickly transitions ta, beta, sigma from AEA, AE8, AEG. And the idea there is to really kind of show an iteration, to show a stepping forward or kind of a moving away from that origin. And so in you know, a couple of quick notes and a couple of quick words, really giving a nod to where we came from and giving strength and weight to where we're going. And that's what I think is important there. The other thing I think is interesting is like AEA being a 151 chord is kind of one of the kind of basic or foundational chords in music, right? It's kind of easy for the ears to understand. It is pleasant. It is major. But then as soon as you take that A and at the top and turn it into a G, it all of a sudden becomes more complex and more thought-provoking. And it's not easy to understand, and it's not easy on the ear. And the first time you sing it and the first time you hear it, you're kind of like, what is this? And I think there's something great about that, because I feel like TBS is just not static and is not something baseline, right? It is something much more complex to me and much more diverse and always moving and changing. And I feel like there's kind of an energy in motion once you take it to AEG that is pretty powerful. And so the thing I always want to stress with this, though, is that AEG is not a thing. I don't want to see anybody signing letters that way or like whatever. This is intended to be, as you're singing it, a kind of solemn reflection of that origin and that movement, so that every time we're singing, we're remembering the history, but also focusing on what's next. And that's what it's really about. And it's amazing to me how just kind of playing around with the music and things starting to fall together, you start to see these patterns, and the story almost kind of writes itself. And I was just kind of so pleased when this all came together, and it sounded kind of cool and kind of interesting, but also a little weird and a little complicated. And it is not something that is meant to do any harm to anyone, like to do any harm to the brothers or to make anybody feel bad. It really is intended as an inward experience. Okay, so now that I've gotten over that, now we have something. What's next? I had to convince Eta Alpha to adapt it as our chapter song so that we could actually start singing it. Because I can't just sing it by myself. This is a song that is meant to be sung as a group. And like I said, I did this for me and for us and for our chapter and for that darn joint rush. Eta Alpha agreed in the spring of 2004, right at the end of the semester. They kept it a secret all summer long, and they learned it in secret in the fall 2004. So zoom forward to Joint Rush 2004 in the fall. Our president pleaded with the brothers to let us sing second. And I also just realized I've been saying brothers this entire time, and I've meant Kappa Kappa Psi. This is why I mentioned that we were gendered chapters at the time. And I do recognize that we are not gendered chapters anymore, and so I'll be a little bit more clear about that going forward. The folks in Kappa Kappa Psi agreed to let us go second. And you could see it on their faces, like your funeral, whatever you want to do. It was like definitely like a 10-minute fight, which seems ridiculous, right? Like, you know, why would they not let us sing second from time to time? But they were just so proud of how Joint Rush would always end. Okay, fine. They're going to let us sing second. I have never in my life felt so connected to a group of people no, not at all, in my entire life as that moment. And when I was putting notes together for this, I was thinking back to it and getting kind of like goosebumps, thinking about that moment. The sister next to me, Vicky Dillon, was crushing my hand because you're all like this and singing and swaying, and it's like broken fingers by the end of this thing. The room was silent this time for us and our song. And at the end, this circle of women just erupted in joy. And it was so amazing to see everybody have so much joy for the organization, and for it to come across through the song, for it to come across, and you could see what everyone was feeling on the inside, on the outside. Our Kappa Kappa Psi brothers, their reaction was very interesting. Somebody came up to me afterward and said, "You got so much better at singing your song." It was like they didn't even know it was a new song. Like they were never listening to begin with. And all of a sudden, we made them sit down and listen. And everyone left with our song in their heads for the first time. And that felt like such a win. And the next day at band practice, I was drum major at the time. So, we were about to go into a field drill practice. And so I'm up on my podium, and the vice president of membership from Kappa Kappa Psi comes over to my podium. We didn't really talk. We weren't in the same group of friends. He played alto sax. I played piccolo. Like, we didn't hang out. And he comes over. He's got his sax. He looks up at me and he says, "I really liked your song." Yeah. And then he walks away. These are like the 8 words that this guy has like said to me all year. And that's kind of when it really hit me how much it had hit other people. So it's hard to not remember that emotion, right? Like that was amazing. That was like the first time I felt like we as sisters in TBS at that moment had a real impact. So the question then becomes, how did it go from being a chapter song to being in the TBS songbook? And I got to tell you, I don't fully know. I graduated, and at Syracuse, we had this thing where the active sisters like never really wanted the alumni sisters, button into day-to-day activities, and so it was kind of expected that you graduated and you went away. And so I graduated, and I went away. Not that I kind of lost my connection with my sisters, it just wasn't, active in or with the organization anymore. The person you really have to thank for this becoming a national song for TBS is Andrea Davis, and she was is my little sister in the organization. She was 3 or 4 years, might have been 4 years, my junior. She's the one that really kind of took it to the next level. And from simple things like I wrote it in SSA, which is soprano, soprano, alto, because like I said before, our chapter was gendered. And so I wrote it for women's voices because we were women's voices. And, she made the song much more inclusive. She is the one who converted it into SATB so that it could be sung by a broader range of voices. She also submitted it to the contest when a new contest was opened up. I honestly don't even know what year it was. Alexis, you might know, or somebody else might know.
Yeah, it was in 2009. It was called Composing Our Future. It was a competition that was implemented by Dr. Dawn Farmer, former Tau Sigma National Vice President for Special Projects at the time. She went on to be president, obviously, and your piece won. Fun fact, so, my chapter song was also submitted in 2009 and came up, I think, second to yours. So, fun fact.
I did not know that. Or you told me that during the convention, and I apologize.
Maybe. I didn't know. I had to ask somebody. I didn't even know. Because like you, I went alumni and went bye-bye, right? It wasn't really involved, so I had no idea. But
yeah, like I said, a lot of us are going pro in something else. And so, jumping into my architecture career and didn't really play as much music, which maybe is a problem, right? Maybe it's something I could have kept on a little bit stronger. But not only did Andrea submit it to the contest, she arranged for the Northeast District to make it the district song. So it wasn't just Eta Alpha at Syracuse University, it was the whole Northeast District. And then she traveled to various conventions that year, like all over the country, building kind of ground support for this song and introducing it to chapter after chapter. And then Andrea was at nationals when it won, and she calls me, and there's all this screaming on the other side of the phone, and I'm like, oh my God, Andrea, like what is happening? And she's like, your song, it won. I was like, it won what? Like, what are you even talking about? I think she did ask me if she could submit it, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And she was so excited, and everyone in the room was excited, and I'm like, okay, here we go, we're doing this now. Like, it's not that I was ever upset that this is where it wound up. I'm actually quite glad. But it, had much more humble beginnings than that. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy is actually kind of like watching the YouTube videos. There's YouTube videos of various chapters singing this song in different ways. There's one where it's done with the cups. The cup. I don't know if anybody remembers the. Gosh, what was that from with the cups?
It's perfect.
Pitch Perfect. Yeah. Where they take the song and kind of stretch it out a bit so it fits with the cup routine, and you can pass the cup around. There's one where it's all men singing the affirmation. But I think the thing that struck me the most was I saw on Facebook randomly someone, after Wava had passed away, was sharing a memory of standing behind Wava or next to Wava while the organization sang this song, and that her response was just beautiful. And I am so sad that I never got to talk to Wava about it or know how she felt about it. But I think that Facebook post made me feel ever so slightly more connected to the kind of full circle. And to know that she likes it in that moment it's very powerful for me. This year at Nationals, now that we are several months past, I can actually reflect on my experience after giving this presentation. I was incredibly moved by everybody's response. First of all, it sounds great. Like, I don't know that I had actually heard a live version of the SATB until then. And at the brunch, I couldn't even sing it. I was bawling the entire time. And the people around me are like, why are you crying? And I was like, I wrote that. Oh my God, it sounds so good. And people are like, can I give you a hug? And this is like during COVID, and we're all wearing masks. And I was like, yeah, I'll take a hug. It's so surprising that we didn't all get sick that weekend. But I also got a chance to talk to a lot of the sisters and brothers in TBS about their feelings about this song. And I was really taken aback by how it had affected so many people. I heard from a sister that told me with the pandemic and all the isolation that they would listen to this song and it would give them kind of hope and comfort that they weren't alone. There is a non-zero number of people who are getting or have gotten tattoos with the lyrics on their body, which was like, oh my God, like, it's like, what have I unleashed on the world? There was a brother who told me he chose TBS specifically because the song resonated more with him than the Kappa Kappa Psi song did. And all of these things just kind of hit me, right? Because I wasn't ever expecting that. It's like, great, you like it, cool. But the whole goal of it being something that kind of better reflects who the sisterhood is today, and maybe is a bit of a better flag, if you can sing a flag, for the organization, the kind of an outward expression that better reflects the organization, and that something seemingly small had a really big impact. And so I want to thank everybody for sharing those thoughts with me. And please feel free to continue to share those thoughts. I don't think I did a very good job of kind of milling about and getting to talk to a lot of people. And so I'm always happy to hear from people and chat if you'd like. But I have some kind of lessons learned from this whole process and some takeaways. One being that change is possible. And I think that there's a lot of feeling that, oh, this is the way things are, or, oh, this is how it's done. But why? Like, does it have to be? And if enough people feel that it should be different, go ahead and change it. Like, and that nothing is so sacred that it isn't open to at least conversation. And having those conversations is what keeps the organization moving forward. And a lot of the things Alexis talked about is, kind of responding to the situation of the day, of the time, and continuing to move things forward. And I will be the very first person to say, when this no longer represents how you feel about the organization, change it, please. Because the whole point of singing the song is that expression and that internal reflection. And so if something else resonates better in the future or tomorrow, make that the new thing. It's totally fine. Which leads me to takeaway number 2. Traditions are great so long as they reflect the organization of today. Can't hang on to traditions just because they're a tradition if they don't make sense anymore. So, for example, the organization accepting only women, that completely stopped making sense. That was a thing of the time, and times are different now. And we being more gender inclusive is what makes the organization what it is today, and it's fantastic. Number 3, we're a sisterhood, and you don't have to do anything alone. So this song wouldn't have become the national song if it was up to me. Obvi. I graduated. I left. I wasn't as engaged and as active. And it took kind of the next person up to really carry it further. There's a lot of things, as Alexis talked about as well, that took many conventions to do. And once you go 4 conventions, your active population is turned over. So you really do need to be building upon the sisters and brothers that came before you. And that's the awesome thing about the legacy in this organization, is that you don't start from scratch every time. You are standing on someone else's shoulders, and you get the opportunity to stand up from that point and then support the next group after you. So using that to make sure that it's always a progression forward and not just staying static. But also the importance of a symbol, that the sisterhood does so many amazing things for music, for bands, volunteerism, for the community, for professional development, all sorts of things. Having something that links it all together in a symbolic way is actually really, really powerful. And that's something that you can carry on to your careers, to your schools, to those of you that are becoming teachers, to your classrooms, that symbols are not nothing, and that they really do have a unifying impact. And then the last thing is also kind of how I ended. Small things can have large and lasting impacts. That just because something is small doesn't mean it isn't important to someone or to something or to an organization. And never discount the impact of small moves that can carry a lot of weight over time. And so you might think you're doing something small or something seemingly insignificant or something just for you. In a lot of those things is the opportunity for it to grow and become something big and important to other people as well. So don't discount the small things, I guess, is what I want to end with.
I always get speechless after you talk. So you have a lot to offer, and it's just been a pleasure researching all of these songs, only to come upon, yours and meet you and listen to, the way that the song about, and then all the wonderful lessons that come from it. It's truly, truly an honor, and so awesome. And I hope that, moving forward, as we continue to potentially add more songs to our song library, is that we'll take down the information about how the songs were started, why they were started, what went into them. Because who knows if the same type of thought process went through the loyalty song, the national hymn, and hopefully we can figure that out sometime too. But definitely liking where we're at right now with the affirmation and everything that you put into it. Yeah, so this was a really great presentation to give, and I hope that moving forward, people who are watching this will just learn from what you've said and really take it to heart and take that back to their chapters and their communities.
One additional thing I would say is that somehow I was lost. Like my name was on the top of all the music, but everyone's like, "Where's Emily? Who is this Emily?" And I mean, like TBS has my email address. Like people have gotten in touch with me over stuff, but nobody is really lost anymore. And it's always great to keep your information up to date with the organization so that you can always be a part of this, even if it's something that maybe you step away from for a little bit of time and then come back. But hopefully things like this song and your rituals and memories will always bring you back to the sisterhood no matter what.